You just said something embarrassing in front of a group of people, and within about half a second, before you've even fully processed what you said, blood is rushing to your face, your cheeks are heating up, and everyone in the room can see it happening in real time. You didn't choose this, you can't stop it, you can't even reliably predict when it's going to happen. Your body has just broadcast to every single person around you exactly how embarrassed you are, in full color on the most visible part of your entire body, and there is nothing you can do about it except stand there and let it happen. Stop and think about how insane that actually is from a survival standpoint. Nearly everything else the human body does under stress is at least partially about concealment or advantage. Fight or flight gets your muscles ready to act. Freezing makes you harder for a predator to spot. Even fear sweat, which we've covered before, is invisible enough that nobody's consciously reading it off your skin in real time. Blushing does the exact opposite of all of that. It is a visible, public, involuntary confession of your internal emotional state, delivered directly to your face at the exact moment you would most want to hide it. And it has been part of the human experience for a very, very long time. So here's the actual question worth asking. Why would evolution build a feature that seems to work directly against you? Why would natural selection, which is supposed to ruthlessly filter out anything that doesn't improve your odds of survival, keep a trait around that makes it functionally impossible to lie convincingly with your face? And what did this mean for ancient humans who didn't have makeup, didn't have the option to just walk out of the room, and lived their entire social lives in small groups where everyone could see everyone's face constantly? Let's start with the mechanism, because it's genuinely strange once you look closely at it. Blushing happens when blood vessels just beneath the surface of your facial skin dilate rapidly, allowing more blood to flow closer to the surface, which is what produces that visible reddening. This is controlled by your sympathetic nervous system, the same broad system responsible for your fight or flight response. But blushing specifically appears to be triggered by a very narrow category of emotional states. Not generalized fear, not generalized excitement, specifically self-conscious emotion. Embarrassment, shame, social exposure, being caught, being complimented in a way that draws unwanted attention, being watched while you're aware you're being watched. Charles Darwin, who studied this in remarkable detail in the 1870s, called blushing the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. And he wasn't exaggerating for effect. Darwin surveyed reports from missionaries and travelers across dozens of human cultures and found blushing, or at least something functionally identical to it, reported nearly everywhere. Humans had been observed across populations that had never had any contact with each other. That kind of universality is usually a strong sign you're looking at something ancient and deeply wired, not something culturally learned. And here's the detail that makes this genuinely strange rather than just mildly interesting. Blushing is one of the only human physiological responses that specifically requires an audience to function correctly. You don't blush from being embarrassed in complete isolation in the privacy of your own head. Research on this, including studies conducted by psychologist Ray Crozier, has found that people blush significantly more intensely when they believe they're being watched, even when the actual embarrassing event is identical. In one particularly telling experimental setup, participants were told they were either being observed live or recorded for later viewing, and the intensity of blushing tracked directly with how observed people believed themselves to be in that exact moment. Your body isn't just reacting to your own internal sense of having messed up. It's reacting specifically to the presence, real or perceived, of other people watching you mess up. Blushing, in other words, isn't really about you. It's a signal built specifically for other people to receive. So now we're getting somewhere, because this reframes the entire question. If blushing is a signal built for other people, the real question isn't why does this happen to you? The real question is, what is it communicating to everyone else? And why would it have been useful for ancient humans specifically to have this involuntary, unfakeable broadcast system built into their faces? Here's the leading explanation, and it comes from a branch of evolutionary psychology, sometimes called costly signaling theory. The basic idea is this: in small, tightly bonded social groups, where your survival depends heavily on other people trusting you, cooperating with you, and being willing to extend you the benefit of the doubt when things go wrong, there is a serious problem. Words are cheap. Anyone can say, "I'm sorry," or "I didn't mean to," or "that wasn't fair. I know. I'll do better." Verbal apology costs nothing to produce and is trivially easy to fake if you don't actually feel remorse at all. If a group's entire cooperative structure depends on being able to trust that someone who violated a social norm genuinely feels bad about it and is therefore less likely to do it again, that group has a massive vulnerability. skilled liars, people capable of performing remorse convincingly without feeling any actual internal shift, could exploit that system indefinitely, repeatedly violating norms and repeatedly talking their way back into the group's good graces with zero actual behavior change. Blushing solves this problem in a way that's honestly kind of elegant once you see it laid out. It is, as far as researchers can tell, essentially impossible to consciously fake or consciously suppress on command. You cannot decide to blush the way you can decide to say the right apologetic words. You cannot decide not to blush the way you can decide to keep your voice steady while apologizing insincerely. Which means an ancient human sitting in a group of 20 or 30 people, having just been caught doing something the group disapproved of, hoarding food, breaking a promise, embarrassing someone publicly, was broadcasting an involuntary, unfakeable, physiologically expensive signal of genuine social awareness and genuine discomfort at having been caught. And that signal was worth something real to the people around them, because it meant this person's remorse could be at least partially trusted as sincere, in a way their words alone never could be. Think about what this actually did for ancient social dynamics. A community deciding whether to forgive someone, whether to give a second chance to a group member who'd violated some shared norm, had access to a piece of biological evidence that modern courtrooms, frankly, would kill for. A physical tell that couldn't be rehearsed, couldn't be performed convincingly by someone who didn't actually feel it, and that was visible to literally everyone present at the exact moment the social violation was being addressed. In a small hunter-gatherer band where reputation was, as we've discussed before, essentially the most valuable asset a person possessed, having a reliable, hard-to-fake signal of genuine social remorse wasn't a cosmetic quirk. It was a trust verification system built directly into the human face. There is a specific detail here that makes this even more interesting, and it's the fact that blushing specifically targets the face rather than, say, your hands or your torso, even though facial skin isn't uniquely equipped for blood vessel dilation compared to other visible parts of the body. Research suggests the face may be specifically targeted because it's the part of the body other humans are already looking at constantly during social interaction. A blush on your forearm would be almost useless as a signal because nobody's staring at your forearm during a socially tense conversation. A blush on your face, the one part of your body that's already the focal point of every social interaction you have, guarantees the signal actually gets received by the people it's meant for. Evolution didn't just build an involuntary honesty signal. It built one and installed it in precisely the location guaranteed to have the maximum audience at the exact moment it mattered most. Now here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable for anyone who's ever wished they could just stop blushing on command. Because the honest answer, based on everything researchers currently understand, is that you were never supposed to be able to. The involuntary nature of the response isn't a design flaw or a bug that a more advanced version of the human nervous system would eventually patch out. The inability to control it is the entire point. A blush you could consciously trigger or suppress at will would be exactly as unreliable a signal as a spoken apology, immediately exploitable by anyone motivated enough to fake remorse convincingly. The system only works as a piece of social trust infrastructure precisely because you can't override it. Every time you've ever wished you could just will yourself to stop turning red in an embarrassing moment, you were fighting against several 100,000 years of evolutionary design specifically built to make sure you couldn't. For ancient humans, this had an interesting secondary effect worth sitting with. If blushing is this reliable and this hard to fake, it also means genuinely shameless individuals, the ones actually capable of violating group norms repeatedly without any real internal discomfort about it, would have been comparatively easy to spot precisely because they wouldn't blush the way everyone else did in situations that should have triggered it. Modern research on psychopathy has actually found reduced blushing response and reduced physiological markers of embarrassment in individuals scoring high on measures of psychopathic traits, which lines up with this theory in a genuinely unsettling way. The absence of the signal may have been for ancient human groups almost as informative as its presence. A person who got caught doing something wrong and simply didn't blush, didn't show any involuntary sign of genuine discomfort, was potentially broadcasting something important about themselves too, whether they meant to or not. So where does this leave the actual archaeological and evolutionary timeline? As you'd expect by now, blush response doesn't fossilize, and there is no ancient skull anywhere that's going to tell researchers directly when this trait emerged. But the reasoning here follows a similar pattern to a lot of what we've covered on this channel. The trait is universal across every documented human population Darwin and later researchers surveyed, regardless of geography or cultural contact, which strongly suggests deep evolutionary roots rather than a recent cultural invention. The trait requires exactly the kind of dense reputation-dependent small group social structure that characterized human life for the overwhelming majority of our species' existence. Long before agriculture, long before cities, long before anonymous urban life made your reputation with any specific individual dramatically less existentially important than it once was. The trait's core mechanical property, its complete resistance to conscious control, only makes evolutionary sense as a solution to exactly the trust problem costly signaling theory describes. Put together, the honest scientific conclusion is that blushing almost certainly predates written history by an enormous margin, likely stretching back deep into the Paleolithic, doing exactly the job it still does today, just in front of audiences of 20 or 30 people around a fire instead of audiences of 1 or 2 people in a modern room. There is something genuinely strange to sit with here. The idea that one of the most universally human experiences, the hot rush of humiliation creeping up your neck and into your face, when you've embarrassed yourself in front of people, isn't a flaw in your emotional wiring. It's a feature that was specifically selected for generation after generation, precisely because it couldn't be turned off. Every uncomfortable, involuntary, impossible to hide blush you've ever experienced was your body doing exactly what it evolved to do, telling every single person around you, without your permission and without your ability to stop it, that some part of you genuinely understood you'd made a mistake. Ancient humans couldn't hide it either. And it turns out that was never a design failure. It was the entire design